Hello again. I'm back here with something a little bit different. I've been thinking about this for a while now. Because when we're talking about, there's always two Japanese shows in particular that always come to mind when we're talking about the best wrestling shows of all time. Those being Super J-Cup 1994, hosted by New Japan, and Dream Slam 1 of All Japan Women. Now, Dream Slam I think is an interesting case because I'm more inclined to think of that show as one of the greatest collection of matches of all time. Because as a show, I think it's not an easy thing to swallow. It's a lot to take in one go. I don't want to say any more about it because I don't want to come off as though I'm shitting on the show, because I'm definitely not doing that. But for what I consider to be the experience of sitting down and watching a wrestling show, I would choose this show first. The Super J-Cup 1994. This is the DVD of the show which you can get from High Spots. I remember the price being pretty reasonable, all things considered. I bought this quite a while ago. You can obviously get it on IVP Videos for cheaper, but then you won't get a case. This has a case, and I like that. So this is the DVD of the show that I have, and there is a lot to cover. So without any formalities, let's get started. We opened up the show with Dean Malenko versus Gedo. This is just solid stuff to get things started, but one thing to take away from this show is that a short match that doesn't have much to it is much, much better than a match that drags on forever, even if it does have some good stuff in it. You know, and when you kind of realize how easy this show is to sit through, that's when you reach that conclusion, I think. This is one of the many examples of that on this show. Plus, the crowd is hot for this, the crowd is hot throughout the night, and that helps a lot as well. So this is very solid. This is just a very tidy opener to get things started. I enjoyed it for what it was. 2.25 stars for that. The first of the first round matches on this tournament. We move on to Otani Shinjiro versus Super Delfin. This is a good match for just the reason of, here you have Otani, who at this time was not yet at that point of being pushed as a serious junior heavyweight contender. So he just comes off in this match as being the technician, I guess, in this match. And he does well in that role, I would say. And then you have to put him against Delfin, who at this time, or throughout his whole career, I guess, had the presence of and the moveset of a standard high flyer. So when you put these two together at this time, you have a very simple but very effective clash of styles, which is exactly what this was. And even saying that, both guys used the other's style at the right moments for some memorable stuff. You know, it's a good match for that. Definitely worthwhile to watch. I'd say a very solid 3-star match there. We move on to another first round match. Black Tiger versus TAKA Michinoku. This is very spotty, actually. This is the most spotty match on the show. It doesn't have much to it. Some of the spots are decent, I would say, and it's not needlessly crazy or anything. And I like the placement of it on the show, actually. I think that even though it's only the third match on the show, it actually feels like a breather at the right time. That's kind of funny, but it does actually feel like a breather at the right time. So I was fine with it. It's very spotty, but it's a fun match for what it is. 2 stars for that. Not bad at all. We then move on to El Samurai versus Motegi Masayoshi. This match is the first on the show that has some clear-cut transitions, some very fluid changes of control, which is good because they were executed well. Samurai took control with some spots that kind of had an extra layer of brutality to them, you know, like head droppy sort of stuff. Then Motegi made a comeback that actually wasn't. It didn't have a lot of energy behind it, I would say, but it did make sense, which is what you're looking for, and it makes the match. It makes that part of the match where they're just going back and forth. It makes that part of the match that much better. You know, I mean, all the matches on the show up to this point were nothing but back and forth. This match was, you know, a bit different. It had some good changes of control, it makes for a good change of pace. So I would say another very solid 3-star match there. Not bad at all. We move on to Ricky Fuji versus Negro Casas. This is barely okay, I would say. You know, it looked like at the start that Casas was playing around with the idea of being heel in this match, and in the end he decided not to for some reason. If he had decided otherwise, I think this could have been a lot better, I think, because this really had no substance to it. It didn't have any really high spots or changes of control or anything like that. It was okay in the sense that it was executed well and it didn't waste any time, but it's not really much to talk about, I would say. Just another 2-star match there. Not a lot to say about it. We move on to Hayabusa versus Jushin Liger. What can I say? Liger was good. Liger, like always, has a really, really good sense of timing. He just knows what to do and when to do it, and it just works for him. That'll boost the rating of any of his matches. Hayabusa, on the other hand, I'd say in this match was barely okay. There was leg work at the beginning, which, although very basic, could have been used for dramatic purposes. Hayabusa could have used it for that purpose. He chose not to, which I could be okay with, because he didn't get his leg destroyed or anything. I could be okay with that if he had good high spots. But he didn't. He didn't have good high spots at all. So what does that tell you in the end? That tells you that this match could have been very good if Liger had taken charge, basically. It could have been very good if that was the case. But, in the end, it was just solid to good, I'd say. 2 3/4 stars for that. A little disappointing, considering, Hayabusa went on to do some pretty notable stuff. Liger is Liger, you know who that is, but not really that much to talk about at this point, so 2 3/4 stars for that. We move on to what I would say is the weakest match on the show, Super Delfin versus Gedo. I think this is the weakest match on the show. It's quite like Fuji versus Casas, except, even with only 8 minutes, these guys felt like they were wasting time. That sounds completely crazy, but it's actually true. This match, with only 8 minutes long, felt like it was wasting time. Like a lot of the other matches on the show, it's just back and forth, but it's not really even good back and forth, I would say. It doesn't feel very competitive. It doesn't feel like they're putting the effort in. I don't like this match that much. There's no point in dwelling on it. 1 3/4 stars for that. Not very good at all. Then we get to Black Tiger versus Wild Pegasus. Wild Pegasus, of course, Chris Benoit. I think this is the first quarterfinal match on the show, and this is a good match. Like the El Samurai versus Motegi match, this has a good set of transitions to it. It takes us a little bit longer to get to that point in this match, but once it does reach that point, it's a damn good match, I would say. Considering what Benoit had to do later on in the night, I think this is a very solid effort for a quarterfinal match. I enjoyed it a lot. 3 stars for that. Then we get to what I would call the first really notable thing on the show, El Samurai versus the Great Sasuke. Okay, this is really good to almost great. This was the first of 3 matches that Sasuke had to wrestle that night. So what does that tell you? That tells you that Sasuke at the Super J Cup 1984 might just be the best individual performance of any wrestler in a single night, because we've got some great stuff to come from him. And in this match, not to discount El Samurai, because he shows that he does have on this show alone, he does show that he has a good sense of timing, of transitions, of all the sorts of things that keep juniors matches from being spot best, basically. And he shows that here as well, But, as with all 3 Sasuke matches on the show, it's his transitions, his high spots, his qualities that make the match what it is, which is in this case a very, very good match. And I'll have plenty more to say about Sasuke before we get to the end of this show. We then move on to Jushin Liger versus Ricky Fuji. Again, this shows the difference between Liger and anyone else who has the same athletic ability as he does. Those people don't have the same sense of timing, and they don't have the same way of reading the audience. This was a match that was laid out to be as basic and as standard as many of the other matches on the show, and yet I'd say this was better than several of those others, because Liger just has a great sense of what to do and when to do it. That allows for some really simple, well executed changes of control. That's all I can say, really. A very solid 2.5 star match. We then move on to Wild Pegasus versus Gedo. This is also better than many of the others, basically for the same reason. I don't rate Benoit as highly as Liger in those categories, because at least not in 1994, definitely not in 1984. And this definitely had the potential to be better, because Gedo had basically snuck his way to a semi-final match. Benoit could have punched him a little more for that, and it would have been better. But, as I'm going to elaborate on later on, a lot of what I valued in Chris Benoit as a performer had not quite fully developed at this stage in his career. You can see the talent. You definitely can see the talent, and his 2 undercard matches on the show were above average, certainly, but there is work to be done, and I'll talk more about that for the tournament final. The match itself was pretty decent, 2.5 stars, I would say. Now we get to the stuff to talk about on the show. The first one being a semi-final match, Jushin Liger versus the Great Sasuke. This is excellent. This is absolutely excellent. You know, this is one of Liger's most aggressive performances ever. And you can believe Sasuke when he pretends to be unconscious. You really, really can, because, you know, Sasuke's comeback is full of great stuff. That'll get more mention when we get to the final. This is 4.5 stars strongly. It could very easily have been higher, but the finish is bad. The finish is very, very bad. And it didn't have to be that way. You know, the way they worked the finish, Sasuke pretty much exposed the fact that he botched the last high spot he went for. And he didn't have to do that, you know. He could have very easily have treated that botch as just selling the effects of Liger's brutality. That's what I thought it was to begin with, and I was very much on board with that. Unfortunately, though, after that little incident, Sasuke pops up, he hits the Frankensteiner, it's 1-2-3 over. That's not good. That's not good at all. They could have improvised a new finish, and to be honest, I think even something that they could have came up with on the spot would have been better than what we got. This is just a bad finish. It's not a drawn-out finish, so it happened so quickly that you can't really detract that from the match they just had, which was absolutely phenomenal. But it does prevent it from being even better. I know Meltzer gave this 4 3/4. I can't go that far because the finish is just quite bad. So that's that match. It's an amazing match up until the finish, I would say. Definitely worth watching. And then we get to the tournament final, Wild Pegasus versus Great Sasuke. This is where Chris Benoit really makes himself a star. I'm sure most people have heard of this. It pretty much sets the standard for what junior heavyweight wrestling is, and I still think it's the best match of its kind. I would say, though, that if you're looking for a career performance from Benoit, it's not the match to go to. This whole show is a career performance for Sasuke. And what strikes me so much is, you can clearly tell the way that he structured these matches is a formula that, what am I trying to say? You can tell it's a format that many juniors these days try to emulate, but don't do it nearly as well. You know, in this match and the Liger match, Sasuke gets victimized badly, and he says it all perfectly so you believe it. But at the same time, this guy presents himself as just so tough and so resilient that he can go into these comebacks with just these rapid-fire, aggressive transitions, and it doesn't feel like he's no-selling or he's becoming spotty or anything like that. You just don't get that same negative vibe from him when he's doing that, and I don't think we have a junior these days that has that same quality. I mean, you can tell that guys like Fuji, Devitt, Ibushi, they're not tough guys. You know, that kind of speaks for itself. Kenta is probably the closest, but I don't think he has it in the same way that Sasuke does. That's not always a bad thing, because, you know, you can put Kenta in the ring with Takayama and have a match that I don't think Sasuke would pull off nearly as well. But there's a lot of qualities that Sasuke has that are just amazing. Some of the counters in this match with Benoit are just perfect examples of what I'm talking about. You know, like I said, I don't think this is a great Benoit performance. I'd only call it good, I'd say. But as we progress through Benoit's career, and particularly in his WWE days, he slows down, he focuses more on his intensity, the way he just screams in agony when he's selling an attack, and obviously his the technical aspect of his performance. Those are the things that I like Chris Benoit for, and here he hasn't really developed that kind of thing. That doesn't hurt the match. It kind of makes the ending feel like because that's just because with a Sasuke performance, if he's not winning, the ending needs to be especially good, and I would say the ending was fine, it worked, but it wasn't one of the stronger aspects of the match. It's still a 5-star classic, something everyone should see, and in the end I think the show is amazing, but if you're going to call it one of the best wrestling shows of all time, I think you need to give quite a bit of attention to the historical aspect of it. You know, the fact that it was the first tournament of its kind, the young stars that it showcased, all those sorts of things. I have no problem with anyone saying this is among the best of all time. Not sure if I would go there myself, though. But it's still an amazing show. That's all for this review. I just wanted to talk about this show. I don't think there's any other reviews of this show up on YouTube, which is kind of strange. But that's my review of it. I will talk to you guys later. See you later.